Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, this is Corby Eason from Utah State Board of Education. Again, I'm the Student Support and Prevention Specialist. And I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this school-based mental health webinar. And today we have my wonderful colleague, Lynette Sheese. She'll be talking about substance abuse awareness, and again, I'd like to thank you for participating in this, and we will also have the action plan question later on. And so I'd like to turn the time over to Lynette, and here you go, Lynette.
Thanks, Corby. So my name is Lynette Sheese. I am the USBE Substance Abuse Prevention and Intervention Specialist. This is a pretty new role for me. I have come from school counseling. Prior to being a school counselor, I was a substance abuse prevention specialist in Wasatch County, and I'm excited to be here and to talk about substance abuse prevention and what that looks like in schools. I've attended quite a few conferences and was looking for someone actually to present this webinar, and I found that I didn't find anything that really talked about what substance abuse prevention looked like in schools. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So here it goes. We know that the later that kids start using alcohol and other drugs, the less likely they are to become addicted. Research shows that kids begin drinking before age 15 have a 40% chance of becoming alcohol dependent. In contrast, a person who waits until the legal age of 21 to start drinking only has a 7% chance of becoming an alcoholic. Drug and alcohol abuse problems lead to high individual and societal costs. The misuse of alcohol and other drugs by school-aged children and adolescents is a behavior that compromises health and well-being, safe and positive learning environments, and academic achievement. The goal of substance abuse prevention, therefore, is to reduce, delay, or eliminate the probability of developing alcohol, tobacco, and drug use disorders. So substance abuse prevention is not new. We've tried lots of different things, and many well-intentioned programs have been tried but haven't been successful. We're going to look at some of those ineffective strategies, starting with zero tolerance policies. Zero tolerance policies remove students from the school without factoring in any variables. They're generally ineffective and counterproductive. Research tells us that schools should have clear and consistently enforced no-use policies, but should not suspend students without considering the context of the situation. Suspending students could just be putting them back in the same environment that they are using drugs to escape from. What about scare tactics? We've all seen them. The first, probably most well-known, is the reefer madness, which turned out to be a lot of hype. The one that I remember best is the egg and the frying pan. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? While scare tactics attempt to use fear to motivate behavior change, and these work for some, but not for others. When exaggerated dangers, false information, or biased presentations are delivered, teens tend to disbelieve the message and discredit the messenger. Exaggerated messages and failure to provide truthful information often backfire when youth have access to contrary information and experience. They can also be harmful. As a counselor in an elementary school, sorry, I'm getting emotional. Gosh. I sat in on an assembly for Red Ribbon Week that the PTA was putting on. I was not a part of that assembly and didn't know what was going to be presented. The assembly was about drug users and when they start using drugs, and went on to use scare tactics that showed that when they use drugs and they go on to steal and then they get put in jail. And it was just kind of an eye-opening, shocking thing for my students, but my students were little. And I sat there and I watched some of my students who I knew that their parents used drugs listen to that information. Kids are smart. They know that their students are using drugs. They did not leave that assembly thinking drugs are bad. They left that assembly thinking that my parents are bad and they're going to go to jail. They were in tears. So we need to be really careful using scare tactics. The Just Say No campaign, that's from the Nancy Reagan era. We teach kids just to say no, and that will be the end of it, right? Well, we all know kids too well. What happens when we tell kids not to do something just because we said so? They're going to do it just because they want to show us that they can. Kids need reasons and skills. Just say no isn't enough. Teaching kids about the dangers of drugs and alcohol has been a long-standing practice. It, in and of itself, is not bad unless that's the only thing we are teaching kids. Kids use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs based on a complex set of psychological and sociological motivations and influences. For some, using substances is viewed positively within youth culture and is also strongly linked to personal identity. The wish to feel like an independent adult and the desire for social status among peers. Knowledge about dangers is certainly a factor in prevention, and youth need to receive this message both from school and home, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. It can't be just curricula that relies solely on information. What about assemblies? They can be powerful if used appropriately, but one-shot wonder assemblies are often heard and then forgotten. Assemblies need to be part of a systemic approach to prevention with prior learning and follow-up lessons. There are also many recovering addicts who want to tell their stories and are approaching schools and asking to do so. This can be kind of scary. You don't have control over what that addict is going to say, and are they using best prevention practices? You don't know what's going to come out of their mouth. And you can't control that, and so that can be scary. Also, although the story may be powerful, some students will miss the whole point and conclude that, well, the guest speaker did drugs and was able to quit, and it's now successful, so I can do it too. There is a place for testimonials, but they should be directed to the parents during a parent night and not the students. Parents can then talk to their kids about the risks and their expectations. We know that parents are a huge influence on their child's decision not to use drugs and alcohol. Effective programs are long-term, comprehensive, and focus more on teaching positive, healthy behavior rather than focusing on drugs themselves. The risk and protective factor model of Hawkins and Catalano is used frequently in prevention. Risk factors are conditions that increase the likelihood that children will become involved in problem behaviors in adolescence and young adulthood. Research has identified 20 risk factors that can reliably predict 5 adolescent problem behaviors, one of which is alcohol and other drug use. These risk factors are broken into 4 categories: community, peer and individual, family, and school. The more risk factors a person has, the greater chance that he or she will engage in the problem behaviors. The list I have listed here is not all inclusive, but shows the risk factors that really stood out to me when it comes to students at school. When we look at these, academic failure is right at the top. Beginning in early elementary school, if kids don't know how to read by the end of 3rd grade, they are at a huge risk for developing problem behaviors later in school. I think we all see that. A lack of commitment to school is a risk factor. And in the SHARP survey this year, you'll see later that this is becoming a problem. Students are not committed to school. Why is that? Family conflict are big risk factors. Abuse and neglect, friends who use. By the teenage years, that's who friends are or peers are turning to. They're turning to their friends. If they're not hanging out with good friends, if they're hanging out with peers that use, they are at high risk of using themselves. Perceived risk of drug use. This also is changing, that we'll see later when we look at SHARP survey results. A family history of drug abuse. Research shows that children of addicts are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction. Good prevention efforts focus on reducing risk and enhancing protection in all areas of life. Therefore, schools are not just a part of the community-wide substance abuse prevention efforts. We cannot be working in silos. We need to be working together with community partners to build protection for our youth. When you look at these protective factors, school connectedness, strong bond with parents. At schools, what can we do in schools? We can help them be connected to schools. We can give them opportunities for pro-social involvement. We can give them good social skills and policies. What are our policies? Kids need to be attending a school with policies against drug and alcohol use. Not sure if you know this or not, but there are people out there to help with substance abuse prevention. Through the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, a statewide system has been created to help communities with substance abuse prevention. The state has been divided up into 13 different regions, as you can see here on the map. Each region has a prevention coordinator and at least one prevention specialist who are tasked to work with community coalitions and stakeholders in the community, including schools, to guide substance abuse prevention at the local level. This is important because the issues that they have down in San Juan County are going to be different than the issues that they have up in Summit County. Working together at the local level, you can look at the specific data for your area and see what needs to be addressed in your own community, and then develop a plan for a common prevention message throughout your community. These local substance abuse authorities are here to help you if you will reach out to them. So schools are in a unique position to have a huge impact on students. We have students for approximately 8 hours a day. Our job is to educate students and prepare them to live a successful life after school. There are some specific things we can do to reduce risk factors and increase protective factors in order for students to be successful. We're going to look at these individually. We're going to look at policies, awareness, education, skill building, and what I believe to be the most important is connection. The first thing we're looking at is policies. Are you familiar with your district policy regarding drugs and alcohol? We know that zero tolerance policies are not effective. Suspending students puts them further behind academically and really does not address the problem. Does your school policy need to be updated? Is your policy comprehensive? Does it reflect what you as a district expect of your students relative to drug and alcohol use? Is it clear? Where do your personal responsibilities lie in regards to enforcing alcohol or drug laws? What about the responsibilities of educating students about dangers of alcohol and drugs, or even educating staff members? Is there room in your policy to balance a particular child's educational success against safe and alcohol drug-free school environment for all students? How do you support a student with a problem such as an addiction or circumstances beyond his or her control that might be underlying the alcohol or drug problem? Is there the ability for restorative justice? Is your policy consistent? I sometimes see groups of students given more leniency than other students. Sometimes it's the athletes, just because we know they're good kids. However, from the coach's guide in Life of an Athlete, it says, more chances do not equal more learning. In fact, letting offenders off or not enforcing all actions for reinstatement models to the models to the offender that the offense and the code is not to be taken seriously. There are many students who will keep drinking or doing drugs because they were not held accountable. How do you hold your students accountable for their choices? Does your policy succeed in producing the desired result? Is it effective? You may or may not personally make the policies, but you do have an obligation to be familiar with them and advocate for change for students if needs be. It is imperative that we have good, solid policies that include input from the board members, staff, students, parents, and community members. Awareness campaigns are programs that bring awareness to students and a great place to involve student leaders, impact teams, hope squads, etc. This is where you can do normative education and correct inaccurate perceptions. I constantly hear, everyone's doing it. However, that's not what the SHARP survey is showing. The risks for teens using drugs or alcohol increases when they perceive that there are favorable attitudes toward use and everyone else is doing it. The social norming messages you create need to reinforce that drugs and alcohol use is not common or acceptable among youth. Working with your community partners and using data, you can create an awareness campaign to focus on your local issues. An example of a normative education campaign. When I was working at Heber Valley Counseling before I was a school counselor, we created a campaign in conjunction with Wasatch High School and Rocky Mountain Middle School there in Wasatch County. It was called the APP program. This was before apps were really big, so I probably might have gotten in trouble for that back then. But we didn't focus on the drugs themselves, but more on the protective factors or opportunities for pro-social involvement. The data from the SHARP survey showed that Wasatch youth were struggling with alcohol and binge drinking. In further disaggregation of the data, we found that students were using alcohol in cars and other places such as parks. This led us to do a focus group survey to find out why students were drinking. Come to find out, it was because they thought there was nothing to do in Heber. Heber's a small town. That's what we always say, small towns, right? Nothing to do. So we took that misconception and ran with it. With our goal of changing their perception, we formed a group consisting of school counselors, the prevention coordinator, the specialist, students, law enforcement, PTA, and business members of the community, and came up with this plan called the APP program, or Activities That Promote Prevention. Each week, the counselors send out an email to the teachers with a new activity, and that activity was printed out and posted in the classroom. This is the poster that we put in the businesses that supported the APP program, but the poster that we put in the classrooms looked a lot like this, except for it had a place to post the activity of the week. Students were involved in creating the poster. It was actually a contest to see who could design the logo that went on in the middle, and so students were involved with this as well.
Oh, okay.
But teachers would post what the activity was that week, and if it was an activity that cost money, business members, a lot of them would give discounts for students visiting that week. As the prevention specialist and coordinator, we went into the schools at least once a month and took new activities into the schools. We did activities such as we taught how to fly fish. We brought in the fly fishing guide from a local business, and at lunch, students were able to go out and learn how to fly fish. We borrowed snowshoes from Wasatch Mountain State Park and had snowshoe races. It was awesome watching the principal and vice principal run around in the snow, and very competitive, and they fell on their face, and the kids loved it. And they just giving kids ideas on things that are fun to do, that don't cost a lot of money, that they can do instead of drinking. It was a lot of success, and very successful, and it was because it was a community-wide prevention program. We brought in all the stakeholders to address a problem that we had, but it was based on the misperceptions of, there was nothing else to do. Oh, sorry. So talking about substance abuse as a health issue is another way in your messaging campaign. Doing it that way puts it in a context that our society has learned to view positively and openly. Just like annual checkups and cancer screenings, substance abuse prevention should become a part of an individual's list of overall health concerns. Using realistic real-life examples, rather than emphasizing what could happen to a person who misuses or abuses substances, provide examples and stories from individuals who have abused substances, resulting in life-altering effects. Help identify potential consequences. Through the consequences of substance use, though the consequences of substance use are well known, it can be difficult for an individual to relate to broad, general concepts. It's more effective to talk about how substance use might specifically affect an individual's personal, daily life. Examples could include things like athletes who drink are twice as likely to be injured as non-drinkers, 54% to 24%, and the body takes longer to heal after an injury because of the reduction of HGH and testosterone. Things that mean something to them. Maybe the effects of marijuana on learning and memory can last for a day or more after a single dose. Just so they know that this is really affecting my learning and can affect it for a long time. Other things, a high schooler and college athlete loses between 15% and 30% from their overall performance when they drink alcohol. Reaction time can be reduced by up to 38% when using alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. This translates to how quickly you get off the line, off a starting block, swing a bat, block a shot, or even stop your car. But helping individuals relate it to their daily lives is a good awareness campaign, messaging campaign. Engage peers as messengers. Individuals, both young and adult, respond best to individuals with whom they can relate. This gives us an opportunity for pro-social involvement and gives them an opportunity for pro-social involvement. So this is a PSA created by Benjamin Z of West Valley City. I believe it's a Granger High School. This PSA made it to the final round of the Operation Prevention Video Challenge contest. I'm not sure if it was done as part of a classroom assignment or why he did this, but it's awesome. And I just want to share with you this PSA that a student from Utah created. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it and it will play.
Awareness, the state or condition of being aware, having knowledge, consciousness. We are not aware. We sit here thinking everything's all right, but really are going through something that no one expected. When you ask me who the real killer is, I don't say this or that. I don't say it's a conventional drug dealer, no. I say it's the one you trust to help you get back, only to find out that's the one who stabbed you in the back. Opioids, it's the real killer, putting over 21,000 Americans in a restless sleep in 2015. If we only had a time machine to undo all this mess, to get back the loved ones lost, to live the life unfilled, if only we were aware. But it's opioids who dim our consciousness. It's opioids who kill the knowledge. So let's wake up before it's too late, before this crisis turns into something much more dangerous. Let us regain awareness.
What a great way to include our students. Make it a school assignment. That way they have to be researching the drugs and the effects that they have and come up with their own ideas about the issues, the health issues. Another part of messaging campaigns, we need to de-glamorize substance abuse. Drug use is often seen as a recreation of the young and beautiful, especially the celebrities, right? For youth in particular, messaging should emphasize the outward effects of drug use, including damage to teeth, breath, and skin. And then there's Red Ribbon Week, and I know that that is coming up. Why do we do Red Ribbon Week? Does anyone know? I didn't. I had to research. Red Ribbon Week actually started after DEA Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena was brutally murdered in 1985 by the drug traffickers he was investigating in Mexico. After his death, people started wearing red ribbons to honor Kiki's sacrifice. Today, millions of people celebrate Red Ribbon Week by wearing red ribbons, participating in community anti-drug events, and pledging to live drug-free lives. Schools, businesses, and the faith community, media, families, and community coalitions join together to celebrate Red Ribbon Week in many ways, such as organizing drug-free races, decorating buildings in red, handing out red ribbons to customers, holding parades or community events, and publicizing the value of a drug-free, healthy lifestyle. I think sometimes the message gets lost with crazy hair or crazy sock day. I know that teachers are like, what is this about? This is killing me. So we need to make sure that students are understanding why we have Red Ribbon Week. They need to know what they are pledging. The message needs to be clear. So when you're looking at your data to determine your messaging campaign, the SHARP survey is a great tool to use. This is the latest survey. This is the statewide survey that has just come out. You can find your area survey at that address, web address that's right there on the slide. And your superintendents should have your more local data. In looking at the SHARP survey this year, you can see that the alcohol use has gone down slightly, but you can also see that, sorry, I'm trying to blow it up just a little bit here because it's really hard to read, that the e-cigarette use has gone up slightly and lifetime marijuana use has gone up slightly. In looking at the risk factors, because the SHARP survey looks at those risk factors, there are some things that really stand out here. Low commitment to school has gone up. Depressive symptoms have gone up, and I don't think that's any surprise to any of us. There was a study done from through Ruling Our Experiences Incorporated, and it's called The Girls Index, New Insights into the Complex World of Today's Girls. It surveyed almost 11,000 girls across the nation about key issues, and overall, when asked about technology usage, girls who spend the most time using technology, which was about 8 hours a day, are 5 times more likely to be sad or depressed nearly every day compared to the girls who spend 4 or fewer hours. We also have research that shows the correlation between depression and substance abuse. In 2016, the percentage of adolescents aged 12 to 17 who used illicit drugs in the past year was higher, 31.7% to 13.4% among those with a past year major depressive episode than it was among those without a past year major depressive episode. We really need to be looking at the use of technology and social media as a major influence on substance use and abuse. Another thing that stands out here in the SHARP survey is the perceived risk of drug use. That is going up, showing that kids are thinking they're not as risky as they used to be. And breaking that data down further, looking at student attitudes and perceptions regarding marijuana use, it's showing right there that no risk or slight risk in trying marijuana once or twice has gone up. And they're also perceiving no risk or slight risk in smoking marijuana regularly. There's no doubt that this is coming from the legalization of marijuana in states around us and the talk of, I'm going to say in quotes, medical, unquote, marijuana. So what does your data say? I hope that you'll look at your SHARP survey and look at your data and break that down and find something that you can run an awareness messaging campaign and work with your local substance abuse authority in doing that. It's a great way to do substance abuse prevention in your schools. So next we're going to look at education. We've looked at policies, we've looked at awareness, and now education. We are schools, we educate, that's what our job is. Difficulties in reading by late elementary is a strong risk factor, not only for substance abuse problems, but for school dropout, violence, delinquency, and teen pregnancy. I cannot stress the importance of catching struggling students early and finding the underlying cause of why they are not succeeding. Helping them learn to read is so important. Other items listed in the health core that we're required to teach: building relationships with helpful people, media influence on making healthy choices, recognizing the health implications of alcohol and tobacco use. We don't need to focus a whole lot on drugs and alcohol in particular. A lot of emphasis needs to be placed on developing life skills. So this is an elementary school. So skills building is huge in elementary school. Children are coming to school lacking basic skills, which is affecting their ability to learn. Specific teaching of social emotional skills that are interactive and involve role play and games needs to be done. Nothing can be learned when a student cannot even sit still. Students need to be taught how to control their bodies and emotions. They need to learn proper communication and listening skills, skills to solve problems and cope with things that sometimes things don't go their way, they need to be able to cope with that. That's life. They need to build self-esteem by being challenged and rising to the challenge. Much of this can be taught through good classroom management, positive behavior intervention supports, and classroom meetings. Mindfulness is showing some really promising results. Academically, mindfulness has been shown to reduce exam stress, improve grades and test scores, improve participation and engagement, improve focus and self-control, and increase social awareness. There are also health benefits, including improved sleep, reduced hyperactivity, reduced anxiety and stress. One study using the MindUp curriculum over 4 months showed students to have 15% better math scores, 24% more social behaviors, and were 24% less aggressive and saw themselves as more pro-social. The best way to describe mindfulness is to imagine a jar filled with muddy water that has been stirred. However, after letting that jar of muddy water sit, all that mud settles to the bottom. It is still there, but there's clarity in the water above. Students are coming to school with their brains all muddled and a lot of stuff floating around. After practicing mindfulness, that stuff is able to settle. The problems they came to school with are still there, but they have settled, and now the brain has space to learn. There are new studies that are actually showing that mindfulness can change the brain structure and function. And this doesn't have to be hard for a teacher. The teacher doesn't necessarily have to be trained in mindfulness. There are some curricula out there that the sessions are pre-recorded and the teacher just presses play and they can participate with the students. But it's a game changer. We need to be teaching students skills for substance abuse prevention. That is most important in elementary school. In secondary school, we're looking at the health core here on your slide. Most of the time in secondary, it's the health teachers who are providing the formal education about drugs and alcohol. These are things in the secondary health core that should be covered. The consequences and use and misuse, the short and long-term effects, the legal consequences, the safe use of medicine, which is super important right now when we're talking about the opioid crisis. We need to analyze the risk and protective factors. Not only we as educators need to be looking at that, but students need to be aware of those too. Talking about peer pressure and practices to support a drug-free lifestyle, different things to do. The media is huge in influencing our kids. The kids need to be able to break down what that looks like. They also need that academic support. We can't forget about that in relation to substance abuse prevention. So you are there to educate, but the fact is a lot of teens know more or think they know more than we do, but many of them are getting their information from the internet. Some of that information is false, and so we need to be able to correct that misinformation. The best way to get through to teens when talking about drugs and understanding what they are thinking is to have a conversation. We always want to do what is in the best interest of students. However, there are still laws that we need to follow when students disclose that they are engaged in illegal activity. So one way to have these conversations is to prep the class before you start. Tell them, I'm going to be talking about sensitive topics today. I'm required by law to report things that you tell me. So today we're going to be talking in hypotheticals. Don't disclose anything you've done. Say, what if, or I know a friend who, and then have a conversation with students. You'll learn a lot, and students will trust you when it comes to information. Many youth are getting a lot of their information from social media too, and it's really important to address that social media marketing and online information. YouTube videos are glorifying booze, right? They're never showing the consequences after, just the fun they're having, and we need to be able to look at that and talk to the kids about those problems that are occurring after or the effects that they're having. Secondary students also need skills. They need study skills, they need stress management skills, peer relationship skills. They need to build the opportunity to build social competency skills to help resist peer pressure. These also need to be interactive and involve small groups and role plays. Students aren't looking for another lecture. They need to be talking and practicing and moving, and things can be done like circles or classroom meetings, life skills via the counselor when the counselor goes in and teaches. The classroom teacher might teach the life skills, or the health teacher. There's some great evidence-based curriculum out there that combine the education piece that we talked about before and the skills building piece for schools. Some of those are online and free, and some have a cost but show great effectiveness. I've listed the website there for SAMHSA that has a search tool that you can look for substance abuse prevention. It can pull up some evidence-based curriculum and show the effectiveness of those, and you can pick the one that's best for your school. So we've looked at policies and substance abuse awareness, education, and skills training. We're now going to look at what I consider to be the most important factor in substance abuse prevention. Connections. Close connections to other people have a strong moral and emotional base. Humans are social beings and need to feel connected. They need to be included or feel included, shown mutual respect, feel valued, and have a sense of belonging. The more students are connected to society, the less they will be engaged in risky behavior. The classroom is its own community. Teachers have the opportunity to build a classroom culture that values each individual. This can be done through circle time or classroom meetings, where students learn about each other, grow together, develop communication skills, explore problems, and celebrate achievements. When people are connected to each other, they respect each other and behave themselves most of the time. When students feel good and safe and have solid relationships with teachers, their academic improves. Their academic performance improves. And that's really what we're looking for. The usefulness of restorative practice, in drug prevention is really important. We need to, if students mess up, we need them to feel like they can come back and they can repair the damage that they've done. Going back to the ROC study, or the Ruling Our Experiences study of the depressed girls, another finding was that girls who have strong and trusting friendships with other girls fare better and report significantly lower levels of sadness and depression. And this backs up that argument for connections. When we are connecting to each other, we're less likely to be depressed, in which we're less likely to use drugs and alcohol. I was fortunate enough to go to the substance abuse conference down in St. George, and Sam Quinones was there. He is the author of Dreamland. He's a reporter, and he did a lot of research on the opiate epidemic, and he traced it back to, in his mind, the isolated lives that we are living. We used to be connected as a society. We would congregate at community events and actually socialize with our neighbors and friends. Now, we isolate in our big houses, keeping in touch through social media, which really is not communicating and connecting at all. He says we're a society that believes in a life of no pain. We believe in living a pain-free life physically and emotionally. We keep our kids cooped up to protect them from danger. No playing in the parks, no riding bikes down the street. Instead, we buy them Xboxes and tablets, which keep them inside and protected, but isolated. In isolation, heroin thrives. If you want to keep your kids off heroin, he says, make sure people in your neighborhood do things together in public often. It's about the real connection to one another. As educators, are we looking at our struggling students and making sure that there's at least one adult during the day that student can connect with? We need to work together to ensure that our students have that someone, that they are connecting with positive influences. Connection is vital. Maslow knew this. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, connection, which is in that loving, belonging part right there in the middle, it comes before achievement or creativity and acceptance of facts. He said it best when he said, a person's basic need must be met before self-actualization can be achieved. Connection is part of those basic needs. The social development strategy comes from the Communities That Care model, focusing on protective factors. When you use the social development strategy in daily interactions with young people, it helps keep them on track for healthy development. This strategy has 5 key components: opportunities, skills, recognition, bonding, and clear standards for behavior. We need to be providing opportunities that are developmentally appropriate for young people, for active participation and meaningful interaction with pro-social others. We need to teach young people the skills they need to succeed. We should provide consistent, specific praise and recognition for effort, improvement, and achievement. We should acknowledge a young person's effort and promote positive bonding, which is a sense of attachment, emotional connection, and commitment to the people and groups who provide that recognition. Bonding can occur with a family member, a teacher, coach, employer, or neighbor. Through the process of bonding, young people become motivated to live according to the healthy standard of the person or group to whom they are bonded. In looking at this strategy from the top down, the goal is healthy behaviors for all children and youth. We start with healthy beliefs and clear standards in families, schools, communities, and peer groups. We build bonding, attachment, and commitment to families, schools, communities, and peer groups by providing opportunities, skills, recognition in families, schools, communities, and peer groups, and by nurturing characteristics. If we provide them with the opportunities, skills, and recognition for their uniqueness, it will build a bond. Kids are coming to us, looking at it from the bottom up. Kids are coming to us with their individual characteristics. We need to be providing them opportunities for skills and recognition. When they are provided those opportunities and they are recognized, they bond with us, right? When students feel successful and are giving that positive feedback, they will do more things to have that positive feedback. It will help them develop healthy beliefs and clear standards, which in turn will lead to healthy behaviors. Policies, awareness, education, skills, training, and connection is a system-wide approach. We cannot just do one and expect it to work. We need to have all components in place. However, we can do all the prevention in the world, and some kids will still choose to use. So what are their reasons? To fit in. Some kids use drugs to fit in. That's where they are socially accepted. Some kids do it to feel good. Drugs make people feel good. If they didn't, people wouldn't use them. There's that initial feeling of pleasure, and some kids are using it for that feeling of pleasure. Some kids use drugs to do better. This is where you're seeing your steroid usage or your Adderall usage at final times. To experiment, because they've heard about it, they see it on the internet, it sounds thrilling, let's just try it, right? Some people do it to show independence or to rebel, because we've just told them, no, don't do it, and so they're gonna try it just to show us, right? Some do it to relieve boredom, and some to feel better, to lessen feelings of distress, self-medicate. When we know that there's a problem or suspect that there's a substance abuse problem, are we asking the why? I would imagine that most youth who are using and using heavily are addressing the latter, to feel better. I read this story to counseling directors, but I think it's powerful about asking a reason why. It's called Killing the Pain with Pot. I'm just going to read it to you. We got a phone call that some students were smoking pot in one of the alleys, so I radioed for my SRO to pull them back in. 3 of our students were there, and all 3 were high. When we got them back to school, we divided them up and talked to them individually. The student I was talking to was new to Lincoln. Here's how the dialogue unfolded. Me, hey, I'm not judging you, but I can tell by looking at your face that you're using very heavily. On a scale of 1 to 10, where's your stress right now? Billy, I'm at a 10. Me, wow, that's way too heavy of a burden for anyone to carry. No one can function when they're at a 10. The brain just isn't in a position to function. You don't have to answer me, but are you smoking in the morning before you come to school? Billy, yes. Me, are you smoking every day at lunch? Billy, Yes. Me, are you smoking in the evenings every day? Billy, yes. Me, that explains how much of a burden you have. Something in your life is happening that is causing that much usage. You don't have to tell me, but I can tell you're dealing with a heavy burden. Billy, I can't smoke enough to make the thoughts leave my head. Me, what thoughts are going through your head? Billy, I lost my sister in a house fire, and she was the only one who didn't get out. I feel like I should have been there. I would have run into the house, and I would have done everything to save her. Me, oh Billy, to have to live with that. Billy, what haunts me every day is that my little sister was in foster care, and her foster father beat her to death. I wasn't there to protect her. I can't smoke enough to get that thought out of my mind. It's in my mind every day. Me, can I help you? I'm not a professional counselor. I really feel like you need some support and someone to talk to that can professionally really help you. If you get that help. Not everyone likes counseling, but he took me up on the offer and we got him connected. The counseling changed Billy's life. His face cleared up, he was smiling, and he was becoming more outgoing. I later pulled him aside and said, Billy, you look so dang good. It isn't any of my business if you're using, but it sure doesn't look like it. He said, I'm not going to lie to you, but I smoke about 3 times a month. I think back and ask myself, what if I had suspended this student for smoking pot and never asked the question, what's really going on here? Why? How many of our students are using to deal with trauma, to lessen the feelings of distress, to forget the crap that they're dealing with? Trauma refers to any experience in a child's life between the ages of 0 and 17 that leaves them feeling hopeless and stuck, or fearing for their lives, safety or survival, or for the life or safety or survival of someone they care about. This can include abuse, domestic violence, natural disasters, accidents, war, etc. Childhood trauma can also come in the form of toxic stress experiences like homelessness, chronic bullying, living with parents, caregivers, or siblings who have a mental and physical health challenges or are struggling with addiction. Most of you have probably heard about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Briefly, it's a research study conducted by Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control. This study looked at the relationship between 10 listed childhood trauma experiences and the health problems later in life. They discovered that a person's cumulative ACE score has a strong graded relationship to health, social, and behavioral problems throughout their lives. During this study, they found that ACEs are common. About 2/3 of individuals reported at least one adverse childhood experience. Almost 40% of the original sample reported 2 or more ACEs, and 12.5% experienced 4 or more. ACEs have also been found to have a dose-response relationship. Therefore, the more ACEs a student has, the more likely they are to have health, social, and behavioral problems. In looking at this ACE questionnaire, recurrent physical abuse, recurrent emotional abuse, sexual abuse, household substance abuse, an incarcerated household member, household mental illness, domestic violence, parental separation or divorce, physical neglect or emotional neglect. A lot of your students have experienced, about 75% have experienced at least one. Think of your students who are really struggling. What do you know about them? How many ACEs do they have? What's the impact of trauma on learning? Research shows that children who are exposed to adverse childhood experiences can become overloaded with stress hormones, leaving them in a fight or flight mode, which is a constant state of arousal and alertness to environment and relational threats. Therefore, they may have difficulty focusing on schoolwork and consolidating new memory, making it harder for them to learn at school. Sometimes trauma can be mistaken for ADHD. Look at this list of the impact. How many of these signs look like ADHD? Easily startled, difficulty concentrating or remembering, conflicts with peers, irritability, outbursts of anger, trouble focusing on classwork. It's easy to see why we might be missing some students who have been traumatized. I was made aware of a student who, from first grade, had a lot of these signs and symptoms. They thought it was ADHD. They were pretty sure he was throwing pencils, he couldn't sit still, he was always in fights with his friends. And first grade, second grade, third grade, same thing. We had met the parents. He had come from a divorced family, but his father seemed very, very supportive, and his mother, or his new stepmother, kind of was really, really strict, like she had come from a military background. And so we wondered if there were some relational issues there. But she seemed supportive when she would go in and talk to the teachers and the counselors. It wasn't until the fourth grade, the end of the fourth grade year, that a teacher went to her counselor and told the counselor, you know, I think you need to check in on this student. And when the counselor checked in on the student, she asked about the red marks on his neck, and he said, we have anger issues in our family, and that's how we deal with anger. He had been choked, and it wasn't the first time, and the counselor was beside herself, thinking that this had probably been going on since first grade, and he was just labeled as an ADHD kid when there was obviously more trauma going on and probably should have been dealt with differently. I think this happens more often than not. According to Jane Ellen Stevens, approximately 1 in 3 or 4 children have experienced significant ACEs. A study by the Area Health Education Center of Washington State University found that students with at least 3 ACEs are 3 times as likely to experience academic failure, 6 times as likely to have behavioral problems, and 5 times as likely to have attendance problems. These students may have trouble trusting teachers and other adults, and may have difficulty creating and maintaining relationships with peers, thus becoming loners. To relieve their anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, and inability to focus, they turn to easily available biochemical solutions: nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, and meth. This is demonstrated in the ACE study findings. Compared to someone with an ACE score of 0, someone with an ACE score of 4 is 443% more likely to use illicit drugs, 555% more likely to develop alcoholism, 1,133% more likely to use injected drugs, 1,525% more likely to attempt suicide. For good substance abuse prevention and prevention in general, we need to be addressing trauma. which goes back to teaching effective social emotional skills in an environment that is safe with teachers who show that they care, thus increasing the protective factors. When students who have experienced trauma mess up, and they will, punishment is often ineffective, and better results can often be achieved with positive reinforcement. Out-of-school suspensions can be particularly bad for students with difficult home lives. Forcing students to remain at home may increase their distrust of adults. Rather than standard punishment, students should be taught to recognize their reaction to stress and learn to control it. This is why skills learning and practice are so important. I saw a fantastic news story last night that sums up just how important it is to address trauma. As you watch the video, think about the risk factors for this particular student and his chances of becoming addicted to drugs and alcohol if the student or if the school did not step up and provide protective factors.
At East Falmouth Elementary. Good morning. The lessons for a young generation caught in the grip of America's opioid crisis start at the front door.
Good history of drug abuse, early delinquency, availability of drugs, physical neglect, emotional neglect. This kid is at high risk, and he's not unique. This is happening in our schools every day. Teachers used to come to school to teach academics, and students used to come to school ready to learn. That's not so much the case anymore. Many students are coming to school lacking the basic skills and abilities. Schools are now tasked with meeting social emotional needs before they can even begin teaching what they are required to teach. But we do it not because we have to, but because that is what is in the best interest of the student. We chose this profession to help students, and we will do whatever it takes to help them succeed. I want you to think what you can do in your school to help students stay drug and alcohol free. In your action plan question, that's your action plan question, what can you do in your school to help students stay drug and alcohol free? I am done with my presentation. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Only kind comments, because I'm kind of emotional right now. I'll wait for just a sec and see if any come in. If not, thank you so much for listening in. Thank you for being an advocate for students and for supporting students. You guys are amazing.